Well, hi everybody. I'm Rachel. I am from the SolidWorks product definition team, and today I'm going to give you a very different presentation. So SolidWorks for Seamsters, this is more personal than the types of things you normally hear from SolidWorks employees. I'm going to show you a couple of projects that I've worked on and then explain my whole process of discovery and just working through it. So first, I'm going to start with my background. So how did I even come up with this concept of SolidWorks for Seamsters? And yeah, so here we go. It all begins with my grandparents. I've been making things my entire life, and it really started because of these two people right here. They were tailors. They're from another country. And when I was 4 years old, my grandmother taught me how to sew. And I loved it so much, it just stuck with me throughout my entire life. Here's a fun picture of some of my best creations from when I was in elementary school. And you can see a theme here. There's some dresses involved, and that comes up later. So as I got older and I kept sewing and I kept making things, my creations got better, of course. Um, but it also transitioned into what I'm involved with at work. So here's a picture from my second internship. So several years ago, we opened up a 3D experience lab, part of the Fab Foundation, in the SolidWorks headquarters in Waltham, Massachusetts. And even though I was an intern, they had me be the mentor for the sewing station. And here I am right in the middle. To this day, I'm still a mentor for the sewing station, and a lot of these people you see in the picture are also involved in a project called Magic Wheelchair, which is where the sewing and the SolidWorks really starts to meld together. So Magic Wheelchair is a nonprofit organization. They are starting to become international. They're based out of Washington State, I believe, or Oregon, around there. And what they do is they find families who have children in wheelchairs, and we are paired with a team and we talk to that kid, talk to their families, find out what they like, and build them an incredible costume that incorporates their wheelchair so that for one day they feel like a star instead of maybe feeling shy about their wheelchair. And this is what leads me into my project. So, all about Magic Wheelchair. A couple of years ago, we were assigned a girl named Freya, and she really loved princesses. She loved pink, she loved frilly things. And so we got to work. We're like, okay, well, what does a princess need? First, she needs a castle. And that was all the CAD work. We had built this massive castle on a floating island being pulled by two cats like a chariot. Um, but no, we couldn't just stop there. We had to think more like, well, what else does a princess need? And we arrived at, well, a princess dress, of course. So after several back and forth discussions with the family, I arrived at this drawing. And so I had asked her all sorts of different questions. I was gathering the customer needs, found out what type of sleeves she liked, what sorts of colors, patterns, all that. And I came up with a sketch. And then I started to make the dress. So her gown was completely custom. I did not use a store-bought pattern. I drafted it myself. And when I'm learning something for the first time, I like to do it the manual way, just so I can understand the concept. And then later on, I will figure out how to refine my processes. And that's where the SolidWorks comes in. But for the very beginning phases, I was doing everything on paper. I was watching YouTube videos, I was taking measurements, learning about proportions, and just drawing it out every single time. And after several iterations, I was ready to go for our first fitting. And as you can see by the picture on the right, it did not fit. The poor girl was swimming in it. But at that point, I was like, okay, well, how can I make this better? So while at this fitting, I took her measurements myself. The previous measurements her parents sent me, but as the person who's creating the pattern, it was much better for me to understand and take the measurements myself from exactly what I needed to know. And here is where we get into the CAD. So because this project was a few years ago, I don't have the best documentation for it. These are screenshots I took at that moment in time when I did this, but the second project I show you, I intentionally did it for the purposes of this presentation, so I have much better pictures. So what I did was, I was so tired of hand drawing every single one of those drafts. I had 10 before I got to this point. Any little thing I needed to tweak, I had to erase it. Or if it was too much of a change, I had to just scrap the draft altogether and start over because it's on paper. I'm using a pen. I can't erase a pen. So then I had the idea of, well, why don't I just do it in a sketch? Because it's the exact same thing. And if I have to make a tweak, I can just change the value. I don't have to erase anything. And then instead of doing all these equations and ratios by hand, I can just do the equation in the system. And that was this major aha moment for me that changed the way I draft patterns for the rest of my life. So this picture on the left is when I am developing the very basic pattern, and then the picture on the right is the shape I ended up with at the end, once I figured out all like the shaping and the lines I wanted it to have. So after I had a model like this, there was still some work I had to do. I did that piece in XDesign. I brought it into SolidWorks because I was using a lot of splines. And to get these outlines, I don't know if my mouse will show up, but to get these outlines around everything, I just did an offset entity, and then I extruded it so that I would have this nice shape around each part. And then I created a drawing in 1:1 scale, which I exported as an Adobe Illustrator file. And now I'm here. So the reason why I went into Adobe Illustrator was first so that I could add all of these labels in so I would know what piece I'm working with. I wrote instructions for like these triangles are telling me that I need to fold the fabric there and like cut out two pieces. But in Adobe Illustrator, the big thing that was important to me was the ability to do a tiled print. So I was doing all this for my house, and I just have a normal paper printer for these patterns. This picture, as you see it here, if I wanted to print it on a single sheet, I would either have to take it to a printer house or get access to one of those giant printers that we do have in the office, but I don't know how to use it. So by doing a tiled print, I was able to use my normal paper and then tape it together. And this is what it looks like in the end. So I have all those pattern pieces, and then you can see a few of them are taped together. And this is using her new measurements that I took myself. And finally, I was ready for the second fitting, and it was perfect. And she loved this mock-up so much that she wanted to keep it, but I had to take it back so that I could use it for reference. Now I'm just going to do a quick flip through of some progress pictures. This presentation was originally for 3D Experience World, and it was a whole hour long. I had to condense it a lot, so you don't need to hear all of the princess poofy details, but here's just some of the process. And at the very end, it looked like this. And here it is on her. And that's the first project. So now we're going to skip forward in time to my next dress. So this one, when I gave this presentation at World, I actually wore it. I'm getting married next year, so I wanted a rehearsal dinner dress. The purpose of this dress, it evolved from something else. Originally, I was going to actually make my wedding dress, but so small tangent. When I went to do some research at the dress store, trying on different silhouettes for purely for scientific purposes, I fell in love with the first thing I tried on. So I said, well, all right, I guess I'm not making this dress. But I had still done some work on the beginning phases. So I decided to make my rehearsal dinner dress instead. And that's how this evolved. So I'm starting with the sketch, just like how I did with Freya's dress, and then going from there. So for this one, I really wanted to focus on having the back be slightly longer than the front. I had based it off of some images I found online. I really liked the silhouette. It looked like it had a very full skirt and then a wider neck. It has this dip in the back that I also thought was nice. And I also made sure to include pockets because those are very important. So here we are back into my process. This time, I just started straight from the CAD. I was a little bit cocky from Freya's dress. I thought I learned all these things and I was ready to apply it for something else. I'll explain why that didn't work later. But for now, you can see this sketch has a lot more to it than the one for Freya. So what I'm constructing here is called a block or a sloper. And the point of this is so that before I start working on the actual pattern, I need to come up with a shape that fits me correctly. And so this particular draft, I had instructions from a pattern book. It was in metric, but it's fine because, we're using CAD. I can just set my document units and everything will be correct for me. So I had all sorts of proportions and equations, and I have construction lines everywhere because things have to line up a certain way. There are some tweaks I had to make. So this is a dress, but these instructions are for making a shirt. So I had to shorten it. So everything below this line here, I just ignored. These triangles here, these are called darts. That's for shaping. All of these cutouts, these are all for shaping. And that's stuff that I really had to make sure was correct before doing anything more. So doing it in CAD as a drawing really allowed me to just skip a lot of the time-consuming process of drawing it out by hand. It also saved my hand from being covered in pencil and ink. So that was nice. This is what it looks like after I extruded it. This piece over here, this is the front and this is the back. So this side here, this is the center front, and then this side here is the center back. And once again, I threw it into Adobe Illustrator. I created this outline by extruding, and then I was able to print it on just a couple pieces of paper and then tape it together just like I did before. So far, very repetitive process. And here is the first version of my practice piece. At the time, I thought this was excellent. So with Freya's dress, I was learning the whole drafting process. With this dress, I was learning more tailoring techniques and how to refine my design. So when I made this, I thought it was great because I'm used to wearing modern clothes, which are typically looser because they're for standard sizes. They're not custom fit to each person. As you can see from the model, there's like all of these loose things over here, which I didn't realize was not fine at the time. But if I had known right here, I would have saved me about 15 more mock-ups. So practice makes better, everyone. Here, I was trying to figure out the different style lines. Let me go back one more time. So I thought this was great. So I decided to base my next pattern off of this shape when I was going to start making my design. So I knew I wanted a seam here, and I knew that I didn't want that gigantic seam, that gap in the shoulder. So I was teaching myself a new technique called dart manipulation. So this triangle thing here at the bottom, I cut this one out, cut a line here, and I twisted the paper until this triangle was gone, and then this triangle was wider. And that's how I got rid of that line. So I'm skipping forward in time a lot here. This is one of the versions of the dress when I was just still working on my mock-ups. And you can see it's still not quite right. This is where I learned, okay, well, this is still really loose over here. And then why is this all wrinkly? I learned that my posture is not the same as the posture of my mannequin. And so when something was fitting on me a certain way, it was fitting on the mannequin a different way. And so I had to adapt my pattern. I also had to, with a mannequin, you can add padding. I was just using like cotton quilt batting to create different shapes. And so I had to sculpt out the back so that it matched me better. And here I am back in CAD. So after pinning that excess and like trying to figure out where to take it away from, I came up with these two different versions of the back. And I added this red line here so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. So what I ended up doing was when I had the piece of paper and I was like cutting things and moving it around and taping it, I realized I can do that in CAD too. So I was just using a bunch of split bodies, rotating it around, and then combining it back together. And that saved me a lot of time and paper. So I wasn't sure where to remove the excess from. So I tried taking it from down here. I just had a triangle and then I just booted this edge up. And then I did the same thing over here, except I put the triangle over here and then booted the whole edge up here too. And then I had to smooth out this curve so it wasn't a harsh triangle. And then I ended up throwing it in SolidWorks anyway instead of XDesign because as you can see, I did move body so many times and it ended up, on my computer, it ended up being faster to do it in SolidWorks instead of XDesign. And I also ended up making all sorts of tweaks here. You can see that this area is much thinner than this area. I had to change the angle. I had to change this shape completely from the back and then make sure that there's extra seam allowance right here so that when I'm sewing it, this corner is not lost. And once again, we're in Adobe Illustrator. These lines, this is what it looks like when you do the tiled print, which was very important for me. I tried to minimize the number of pages that I was using because I mean, it's better just to have less waste. And then it also took me less time to tape everything together. And this picture is near the very end of my drafting process. I was comparing the different armholes. So one of the other problems that I found was when I was trying to fit it on myself, it kept wrinkling under the armpits. So I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? So reading all sorts of different tailoring articles and books, I found out that, okay, well, there's too much material either in the front or in the back. So I put the prototype on myself. I looked in the mirror. I found where the wrinkle started and where it ended. And then I just gouged out some material from the front and the back, wherever that wrinkle was, until it no longer appeared. Once that was set, it was time to actually begin constructing the thing. So I'll speed through this again as well. So here's the final fabric I used. This is the bodice in progress. It's looking so much smoother as it's sitting on the mannequin. This is what it looks like inside out. And this is the liner that I had to add. This is the gigantic pocket. This is when it's nearly done. I'm inserting the liner. I made my own custom label too. This is the beginning of the Rachel Elizabeth collection. You heard it here first. And this is what it looks like when it was finished. There are still some tweaks I did after I took this picture. Like you can see the zipper is a little visible here. After this, I ended up doing some tweaks to cover that up. But from the earlier mock-up I showed you to the one now, the shape of the top changed a lot. So this cutout here became a lot more curved. And I found out, well, hey, humans are organic and we have shapes and we're not rectangles. Wow. So having that very sharp triangular back cutout just wasn't working. And that's what was causing those gaps the whole time. So by making it rounder, that took care of that problem. And then you can also see that these armholes come in a bit more, and that's to prevent the wrinkling. I also shortened this area here in the waistband so that it wouldn't wrinkle in the back. And this is what it looks like when I wore it. And when I gave this presentation at 3D Experience World, I wore it too. It was a great prop. And that's the end.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we've got a question in the room. Yeah.
Of course.
Have you considered taking your paper pattern and sketching it and scanning it and then bringing it in as an image in the background of your sketcher, and then you would just have to trace the lines?
I did not consider that because at this point in my discovery, I was completely starting over. Like I was doing things very incorrectly. But in the future, now that I have this pattern, I can definitely do that to base future things off of.
Good to know. Yeah, makes sense. Okay.
It's a lot of trial and error.
Yeah. Either way, is it ultimately at the end a little, yeah, a lot of trial and error, but maybe it would get you a couple less iterations possibly.
So,
Not-
and
but
Mhm.
is the ultimate goal to click on a parameter size 8 and change it to 10?
The
And
ultimate
then have
goal,
the rest update?
I would love that. I have not figured out how to do grading yet because I've only been making custom pieces that have like the person's individual measurements. But if I were to make something in standard sizes, I would absolutely want to figure out how to do the equations to just grade the whole thing up parametrically. And I think I could too.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, trying to have it parametric. Good idea. I
Question.
okay. Well, hold on one second. I think possibly Brandon online. Did you have a question as well? Did I see that? Didn't want to wait too long. It's possible it was just a clapping emoji. It's a little hard to track.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's no question. Just
Okay, I thought I saw something. All right, never mind then. Go ahead, Ashley.
Um, I was curious, how did you adapt your pattern away from the mannequin?
Away from the mannequin?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a lot of trying it on myself and comparing it.
okay, fair.
But I built up the mannequin to match myself. And
Gotcha.
that also took a long time.
Have you considered making a mannequin from 3D print? Like 3D printed blocks that you glue together?
Oh,
I
good
haven't,
idea.
not at 3D printed blocks.
You scan yourself.
So
However,
obviously there's. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
oh yeah, I did actually, hang on, if I get out of the main mode, I can show you one of the slides. Okay, so here are all the slides that I didn't show you. I modeled one actually a long time ago. It's not exactly the right size, but you absolutely could make one using X shape. And I probably wouldn't 3D print it because I wouldn't be able to put pins into it, or I would have to make it smaller and then put something soft on the outside. But I could use this to potentially generate a surface off of and then flatten the surface pattern. And then I might be able to do something with that.
There's the possibility of making like an automotive style block with a router. And then just have panels that interlock.
Oh, okay. I think I know what you
Ooh.
mean. Yeah, that would be quite fancy. Yeah.
Access to the shop pod or.
Yeah. And you also brought up a good point, Rachel, that yeah, you'd want to probably size things down so then you could put like a padding on top, right?
Yeah.
For pins and stuff. So yeah,
Mhm.
and so whether we do either one though, you could like scale it. You could probably, it might require a little trial and error the first time to figure it out, but maybe you scale it, 99% or something to leave room for fabric or something.
Very cool problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you figure out the pattern the first time, you can use it forever and make adaptations based off of that.
Gotcha. And I think for reference, Joe has thrown a couple things in there about some costumes. Joe's always great about throwing in some articles and stuff pertaining, and I think he had one about looks like Wonder Woman
Ooh.
3D printing and scanning to give us all some ideas. So definitely grab that link. Anyone, we'll share it afterwards as well.
Yeah, Katie actually scanned herself and brought it into SolidWorks to make some of the patterns. So just a thought.
I'm actually gonna do that for a pair of shoes I'm making. So
There you
that's
go.
awesome. Glad to know it works.
Yeah. Well, if you were local, I'd say you come by and use our new scanner and try that out, but hopefully you have one. Connor, you were saying something?
I was gonna say, like they mentioned, if you had built your kind of base shape in SolidWorks, you'd even be able to take the surfaces and flatten them. That'll show you where there's areas of like stress concentration where you need to put your guards.
Yeah,
Yes,
good.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, right. Which is, I think the one of your initial problems, right, was the stress concentrator areas.
Yes.
But can you flatten most sheet metal flattening process wouldn't work here because that needs a basically a cylinder that you're flattening off. But I've seen a program that was used with solid modeling where they were doing tents, and they were and also one of my customers, BF Goodrich, with the escape slides. It's a very similar problem, and they were able to flatten irregular surfaces.
In SolidWorks, I think can't remember if it's in just professional or if you have to go all the way to premium. They do have a way of flattening complex surfaces also.
They do it by meshing.
Okay. Our old SolidWorks expert on the sales side here. Yeah, so SolidWorks Premium can do that surface flatten, but it is a little complex in my experience. It's imperfect, but it's like close.
Yeah, sometimes you have a lot of spherical style surfaces. If you know where to split it, it's kind of trial and error to get the flattened, so it's actually
Proper.
realistic.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We've definitely had that issue. Yeah. And I think Joe may have shared some additional information on chat again, if anyone.
Just curious, the iteration process with that like test fabric that you use, is that
Yes.
a pretty inexpensive fabric, or is that
Oh, it's just a cotton muslin. You can buy it in like 90-yard rolls from Amazon. It's quite cheap.
Okay. Perfect.
I was just wondering if it was like every iteration is super important, or if it's like it's faster to just kind of throw something together.
Nope, it's made out of junk. This red fabric, somebody gave it to me for my birthday when I was like 13. Don't know what it is, and that's fine. This one is the cotton muslin.
Okay.
The difference
So
between
like
this,
per foot.
yeah, I would say with this one, because it's cotton, it's stiffer. So if you're trying to if you don't want to iron anything, but you just want to press it with your hands, it'll take a crease pretty well.
Okay.
Do you have to make any extra adjustments like with the different materials as far as where to cut things?
Can you say it again? The audio got weird.
She was wondering if you had to make any adjustments between different materials, like if it's a more lightweight material, but you're mocking it up with that, you have to cut it a little differently, I think is.
Yes. So Freya's dress, the difference between this mock-up and her final dress, the final dress was just so much thicker. And at the time, it didn't occur to me, but afterwards it makes perfect sense. So this is just a single layer of this red mystery fabric, but her final dress, it's made of 3 layers. So the inner layer is a cotton. I used a stiffening layer in between. I used denim, and then the outside is this pink satin. And because it was much thicker, I needed to add a little bit more ease into the pattern than I had with the mock-up.
Okay, gotcha. So it really is just a constant tweaking process, it sounds like, because anytime what seems like a relatively small detail changes, it means you might have to make a little adjustments, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting.
Just a quick question. Is there a specialized software that already does this and she's using SolidWorks to do it as well? Or there's no software that does this, it's typically done by hand?
There is a software that does this. It's called Clo 3D. I haven't used it, but it looks awesome and I want to use it someday. I just did things the old-fashioned way with a SolidWorks twist.
Gotcha.
Add it, so it's too called exact flat.
Oh, okay.
All right, yeah.
That's for them before, but I haven't seen it like.
I wonder if it's one of those SolidWorks bot maybe and is integrating or something. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. You call it exact flat?
Exact.
Oh,
Exact
exact.
flat.
Got it.
I forgot about that actually. I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Joe's so fast on the trigger. I think we got
Nice.
a link in there, so we'll have to check that out.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, that was really great. Thanks so much for presenting that, Rachel.
Thank you.